Hello and welcome to week 7 of Info 655 Digital Preservation and Curation. This week I'm discussing data management. In OAIS terms, that primarily means descriptive metadata management. Of course, metadata is a much broader subject than just descriptions, so I'll keep that broader view in mind. The plan is to first situate data management within OAIS, and then from there to review various systems and architectures that are employed for descriptive metadata creation, management, and access. I'll also review the metadata objects that can be shared between those systems and what we have to keep in mind while planning one out. Finally, I'll talk about some of the work required to actually run these systems. The key points to keep in mind about data management are, number one, that metadata is the primary product of most cultural organizations. That means that the heart of the organization is often its system of creating and managing that metadata. Number two, the best format, schema, whatever for metadata depends on the context of its use. It can and should change within the course of any workflow as it moves from system to system and from context to context. Finally, not everything has to end up in a database. When we think about metadata, oftentimes we almost leap to the conclusion of there needs to be a database involved, but in fact, you might not be able to get all the metadata that you collect into a database. It just might not be capable of hosting that part of your schema. And so therefore, be liberal in how you think about managing metadata. And sometimes, accepting that it's fine to keep it stored as a file or as a different kind of data object that's not as readily available as a database. So keep those in mind as we go through. And now we'll head into some OAIS diagrams. Okay, so descriptive metadata, it doesn't really live in a single functional entity within OAIS. So I'm starting zoomed out here. And I want to remind you that the flow of a digital object starts from the left with producer and passes through these various functions until eventually it gets to the right where a consumer can actually access it. And when we talk about descriptive information, it's the same thing. The producers are on the left and the consumers are on the right. Except, in this case, the producer is us. After generating an ape, we generate descriptions. And there's that little function there, generate descriptive information. Thinking of this practically, we only describe the things that we decide to keep. And we describe them before putting those things into storage. Descriptive information is then sent from data management or from the ingest function to data management, while the ape is sent to storage. And remember that in OAIS terms, descriptions are considered related to, but not a part of the ape. And that's something that feels very clear in a physical sense. When you catalog a book, the description lives in a catalog while the book lives on a shelf. It often makes sense to do the same thing with digital objects. The description lives in a database and the files live in a separate repository. That's not always going to be the case, but at least from a conceptual point of view, I think it's easier to think of it as that and then to modify it as your systems change. But as for the data management entity, it's relatively simple. What's happening over there is that it can receive descriptions, it can search descriptions, it can provide descriptions. And at the heart of all of those functions is a database of some kind. It could be a relational database, it could be a NoSQL database, it could be a doc store, whatever it is. This is a very OAIS thing. It tells us you need a thing to do, but doesn't tell us exactly how to do it. So let's get into some more formal definitions of those functions. So we have receiving updates. That's getting new descriptions from ingests or updates from administration. And updates from administration, that can be things like updating the authorized headings that you're using for your name entities and things like that. You're performing queries. So that's what your users do when they try to find out what's in your collections. You're also generating reports, which is a lot like performing queries, except think of it as a higher level summarizing function, primarily done by administrators and other internal staff users. And then finally, administrating the database. So making sure that the system continues to run and run well. Now, as always, the caveat for anything in OAIS is that reality is different from this. It says, here's a single database, In reality, you might have multiple databases that comprise your systems. You might even have parallel descriptive systems. And so you write a catalog record and a finding aid at the same time and send them to different databases. So you have two different data management entities. You might bundle together your digital objects and your descriptions in a single system. So, the actual implementation, it's less important than thinking about these general principles of the fact of you're creating the metadata at some point, you have a thing to take care of that metadata, and that thing can provide it over to your access system. No actual implementation is going to look exactly like this drawing that we looked at.